The laughter followed Daniel Harper down the winding dirt road, a chorus of jeers and pity from the townsfolk, who couldn't believe his luck or lack thereof. A haunted shack, they'd called it. A rotting pile of wood out in the middle of nowhere. His great-aunt's will had left him the old cabin, a place whispered about in hushed tones as a worthless, cursed relic. As Daniel stepped onto the porch, the air grew still. The cabin was a silent sentinel, its weathered planks a testament to a bygone era. He turned the key and the door creaked open, revealing not the musty rot he expected, but a room steeped in history. A grand stone fireplace dominated the space, and a plush armchair sat before it as if waiting for a guest. But what truly captured his attention was the massive, floor-to-ceiling bookshelf that lined one wall. Daniel ran his hand along the spines of the journals, each one a window into a different time. He pulled one out. It was his great-grandfather's. The brittle pages were filled with elegant cursive detailing. Life in the early 1900s. Another, a soldier's diary from the war, held haunting accounts of courage and loss. Tucked between the journals were faded photographs of generations of Harpers, their eyes gazing back at him with stories he never knew. In a hidden compartment of an antique desk, he found a collection of his great-aunts' keepsakes, a locket containing a lock of hair, a silver pocket watch, and a small, beautifully carved wooden box. Inside the box lay a collection of heirloom jewelry, each piece glinting under the dust. Word of Daniel's discovery spread like wildfire. The same people who had mocked him now stood at his door, their faces a mix of disbelief and awe. The haunted shack had become a treasure trove, a monument to a family's legacy. Daniel stood in the doorway, the quiet dignity of the cabin a stark contrast to the silence of the townsfolk. He hadn't just inherited a cabin, he had inherited a history, a priceless legacy that was more valuable than any amount of money. Daniel's life changed completely. The quiet ridicule of the town had vanished, replaced by a deep, almost reverent curiosity. People who had once scoffed now lined up to see the cabin, to touch a piece of the history it held. He organized tours, meticulously sharing the stories of his ancestors. The soldier who fought for a better world, the artist who painted the landscapes around the cabin, and the matriarch who had carefully preserved it all. He found himself growing closer to his family's past, poring over the journals and photographs, piecing together a rich tapestry of their lives. He discovered a hidden talent for carpentry, using old tools found in the cabin's shed to restore antique furniture and preserve the structure of the house itself. The worthless shack became a living museum, a testament to the resilience and enduring legacy of the Harper family. The cabin wasn't just a building. It was a home filled with echoes of the past, a place where Daniel could finally understand his own place in the world. He was no longer just Daniel Harper, the man who inherited a shack. He was the guardian of a legacy, a link between the past and the future. The same people who had once laughed were now asking to be a part of his story, and Daniel, in his newfound role, was more than happy to share it with them. Years turned the old worthless cabin into a cornerstone of the community. Daniel, now a respected historian and craftsman, became the heart of it all. He hosted workshops on historical preservation, teaching others how to care for old heirlooms and documents. The Harper Heritage Museum, as the cabin was now officially known, was a must-see for tourists and a source of immense pride for the locals. His journey, however, wasn't without its challenges. There were always those who, out of envy, tried to devalue his work or claim the cabin held little importance, but Daniel remained unfazed. He had found his purpose not in the monetary value of the artifacts, but in the stories they told and the connection they forged between generations. One day, an elderly woman from a neighboring town visited the museum. She walked slowly, her eyes scanning the familiar photographs and journals. When she reached a picture of Daniel's great-grandmother, a young woman with a kind smile, she stopped. "That was my best friend," the woman whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "We lost touch after the war." This chance encounter led to a beautiful exchange of stories. The woman shared memories of his great-grandmother that Daniel had never heard, filling in the gaps in his family's history. He realized the true value of his inheritance lay not just in what was inside the cabin, but in the connections it continued to create. The old, forgotten cabin had become a bridge, linking the past to the present and reminding everyone that a legacy is built not from wood and stone, but from shared history and human connection. Daniel Harper, now an integral part of the community, continued to expand the legacy of the old cabin. With newfound purpose and a deeper understanding of his ancestors' lives, he began writing a book, a historical account of the Harper family interwoven with the broader history of the region. The project became his passion, a way to share the wealth of knowledge he'd unearthed with an even wider audience. He meticulously transcribed the journals, cross-referenced the photographs, and interviewed more of the town's elders who remembered his family. The book, titled The Unseen Legacy, was not just a collection of facts. It was a deeply personal narrative that brought his ancestors to life, detailing their struggles, triumphs, and the quiet moments that shaped them. The manuscript was a labor of love, a tribute to the people who had built the cabin and the history it contained. When the book was finally published, it became a local sensation and quickly gained regional acclaim. People were captivated by the story of the Harper family and the seemingly worthless cabin that held so much treasure. It was more than a book about a family. It was a testament to the idea that every life holds value, every history is worth preserving, and that true wealth lies not in money, but in heritage and human connection. Daniel, once the subject of laughter, had become a local hero. The old wooden cabin, once a symbol of his supposed misfortune, was now a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of a legacy that was hidden in plain sight all along. The laughter was long gone, replaced by a quiet respect for the man who saw the true value in a pile of rotting wood and, in doing so, found himself. The success of Daniel's book, The Unseen Legacy, catapulted the Harper Heritage Museum into the national spotlight. Journalists from prestigious magazines and television programs traveled to the once-mocked cabin, eager to tell the remarkable story of a man who found his fortune in history, not in money. The once quiet dirt road was now frequented by tour buses, and the small town, once known only for its gossip, was now on the map as a historical destination. Daniel handled the newfound fame with the same quiet humility that had defined his life from the moment he stepped into the cabin. He used the profits from his book and the museum to create a foundation dedicated to preserving local history. He bought and restored other forgotten homes in the area, turning them into small, living museums that told the stories of other families who had helped build the town. He never forgot the old woman who had reconnected him with his great-grandmother's memory. With her help, he uncovered more stories and artifacts from her family, and he dedicated a new wing of the museum to their shared history. He understood that a legacy wasn't just about his family, it was about the collective memory of a community. One day, while leading a tour, Daniel paused and looked around the crowded cabin. He saw the faces of people from all walks of life, some who had once laughed at him, and others who had traveled thousands of miles to stand in the very room he had once believed to be worthless. He realized that the greatest treasure he had inherited wasn't the journals or the heirlooms, but the ability to see the value in things that others had overlooked. He had not only preserved his family's history, but he had also taught an entire community to cherish their own. With the Harper Heritage Museum a resounding success and his book a bestseller, Daniel could have easily retired, enjoying the wealth and respect he had earned. Instead, he felt a new calling. The true legacy, he now understood, was not just about preserving the past, but about building a better future. He initiated a youth mentorship program, inviting students to work at the museum. He taught them the skills he had learned: historical research, artifact preservation, and the art of storytelling. He watched as shy teenagers, initially skeptical of the old cabin, came to life as they uncovered forgotten stories and connected with the past. They too were learning to see the value in what others overlooked, to find purpose in history, and to appreciate their own family's narratives. Years passed, and Daniel, now a beloved and respected elder, would often sit in the plush armchair by the grand stone fireplace, just as his ancestors must have done. He would watch the young people bustle about the cabin, their laughter and energy filling the air. The sounds were a stark contrast to the silence he had first encountered. The cabin, once a symbol of ridicule, was now a vibrant hub of learning and community. On a quiet evening, as he was closing up, a young intern paused at the door. "Mr. Harper," she said, "thank you for everything. I never thought I'd find my passion here in a dusty old cabin." Daniel smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The cabin was never dusty," he said softly. "It was just waiting for someone to see its light." He had not just inherited a house, He had inherited a purpose. He had not just preserved a legacy, he had become one. The boy who had been mocked for a worthless inheritance had, in the end, proven them all wrong, building a life far richer than anyone could have ever imagined. As years turned into a decade, Daniel's hair had turned silver, and his steps were a little slower, but his passion for the Harper Heritage Museum had only deepened. The mentorship program he'd started was now a well-regarded institution, with former students returning as volunteers and even starting their own historical preservation projects in neighboring communities. The worthless shack had become a beacon of cultural heritage for the entire state. One crisp autumn morning, a film crew arrived, not for a documentary on the museum's history, but to film a feature movie based on Daniel's book. The director, a renowned artist known for capturing the heart of small-town America, insisted on filming on location. Daniel, serving as a historical consultant, watched with a quiet sense of awe as actors portrayed his ancestors, their stories brought to life in the very rooms where they had once lived. He saw the actor playing his great-grandfather stand by the stone fireplace, reciting lines from the very journal Daniel had found. The film, titled The Harper Legacy, went on to win multiple awards, and the story of the man who turned ridicule into a legacy became a modern-day fable. Yet for all the global recognition, Daniel's greatest satisfaction came from the simple moments. It was in the eyes of a child who, on a school trip, discovered a distant ancestor in an old photograph, in a young intern proudly presenting a newly restored heirloom, and in the quiet conversations he had with visitors who shared their own family stories, inspired by his. One evening, after the museum had closed and the last car had driven away, Daniel sat alone in the quiet cabin. The moon cast a soft glow on the old journals and photographs, their silent presence a comfort. He smiled, thinking of the great-aunt who had left him this worthless gift. She hadn't left him a shack. She had left him a life, a purpose, and a profound understanding that the greatest treasures are not found, but built brick by brick, story by story, and heart by heart. His legacy was no longer just his family's. It belonged to everyone who dared to see the value in what others had overlooked. Years after the movie's success, the Harper Heritage Museum flourished, a testament to the power of a single, meaningful discovery. But Daniel, now in his late 70s, knew his time was not infinite. He had spent his life safeguarding a legacy, and now he had to ensure its continuation. He established a trust, placing the cabin and all its contents in the care of the Harper Heritage Foundation, the very organization he had founded. He appointed a board of directors comprised of his most dedicated former mentees and a few trusted town elders. The foundation's mission was simple: to preserve the cabin and to continue its educational programs, ensuring that future generations could also find inspiration within its walls. One chilly winter evening, as the first snowflakes began to fall, Daniel sat by the fireplace, a young woman by his side. She was his grandniece Maya, a bright and inquisitive history student from a distant city. For years she had been a regular visitor, captivated by the stories and the tangible history that filled the cabin. "I'm ready to take on the responsibility," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "I want to be the next guardian." Daniel smiled, a sense of peace washing over him. He knew he had found the right person. Maya had his respect for history, her own passion for storytelling, and a deep, intuitive understanding of the cabin's true value. He handed her a key, a single, old-fashioned key just like the one he had, first used to open the door all those years ago. "The cabin was never just about our family, Maya," he said, his voice soft and warm. "It was about the idea that every life is a story worth telling. Now it's your turn to make sure those stories are never forgotten." Maya looked at the key in her palm, a symbol of not just a house but a legacy. The old worthless cabin was a beacon of hope and a reminder that true riches are found not in gold, but in the echoes of the past and the promise of the future. The circle was complete, and Daniel knew that the legacy of Daniel Harper, the man who had turned ridicule into a triumph, would continue for generations to come. With the Harper Heritage Foundation firmly in place and Maya at the helm, Daniel found a new kind of peace. He spent his days watching the world go by from his favorite armchair, the cabin's warmth a constant comfort. He had done all he could to ensure the legacy would live on, and now he could simply be. One afternoon, a young family visited the museum. The parents, with 2 children in tow, were new to town. They had heard about the cabin and the man who had brought it to life, and they wanted to see it for themselves. Daniel, who was sitting quietly in the corner, overheard the father whispering to his daughter, "See, honey, this is why you should never judge a book by its cover. A treasure can be hidden in the most unexpected places." The little girl, no older than 10, walked up to Daniel. She held a small crumpled piece of paper in her hand. "Are you the man from the story?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Daniel smiled warmly. "I suppose I am," he replied. "My grandma told me about you," the girl said, unfolding the paper to reveal a clumsy, hand-drawn map. "She said you could help me find my family's treasure. It's in an old box in our attic." Daniel looked at the map, his heart swelling with emotion. He didn't know what was in that box, but he knew exactly what the little girl had already found: hope, curiosity, and the beginning of her own family's story. He took her hand and, with a knowing look, began to share the tools she would need to uncover her own legacy. He had come full circle, not just the guardian of his family's history, but a guide for all those who sought to find their own. The legacy of the worthless shack was no longer just about the past. It was a living, breathing testament to the endless possibilities of the human story. Years had passed, and the old wooden cabin, now a treasured landmark, continued to draw visitors from all walks of life. The story of Daniel Harper, the man who had turned ridicule into a legacy, had become a local legend, passed down from generation to generation. Daniel, now in his 90s, had long since retired from the daily operations of the museum, leaving it in the capable hands of his grandniece, Maya. He spent his days sitting by the window in his favorite armchair, a gentle smile on his face as he watched the world he had helped shape. One quiet afternoon, as a gentle rain fell on the cabin's roof, Maya came to sit with him. She was no longer the young, eager student. She was a confident woman, a respected historian in her own right. "Someone called today, Daniel," she said softly. A family in the next state found a box of old journals while cleaning out their grandparents' attic. They said our story inspired them to look for their own history. They want to donate the journals to us. Daniel's eyes twinkled. He didn't need to hear more. The legacy wasn't just about his family anymore. It had spread, inspiring others to seek out their own stories. The cabin, once a symbol of his supposed misfortune, had become a beacon of hope and a testament to the idea that every life holds a story worth telling. The laughter of the townsfolk was long gone, replaced by a quiet respect for the man who saw the true value in what others had overlooked. He had not only preserved his family's history, but had taught an entire community, and many others, to cherish their own.